European Union says it wants to strike a trade deal with the United States in the coming days to avoid sweeping new tariffs threatened by President Donald Trump. The EU Commission confirmed it is aiming to seal the deal before August the 1st, when Trump's higher levies are due to kick in. Trump, meanwhile, says negotiations are going well with both the EU and China. EU Trade Commissioner Markos Sefcovic told the European Parliament that EU unity remains absolutely crucial and that the bloc is working to protect itself from trade diversion by other countries. He said their diversification agenda remains a priority and the EU's regulatory framework is non-negotiable. Sefcovic added that they hope to reach a satisfactory result in the coming days and have made good progress on the text of an agreement in principle, with talks continuing remotely every day. The EU insists its priority is a negotiated solution but warns that some rebalancing will remain. The EU has also promised to defend its interests and prepare for all scenarios if talks drag on, with some leaders warning that negotiations remain complicated right up to the deadline. Let's listen in to what the European Commission spokesperson had to say.
The United States has moved its deadline for finalising deals with partner countries to the 1st of August. However, we aim to reach a deal before then, potentially even in the coming days. We have shown our readiness to reach an agreement in principle, and the Commission has consulted closely with our Member States and industry to ensure that there is a high degree of cohesion in our overall EU approach.
We're now joined by Peter Cordello, who's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities. He joins us live from New York to discuss this story further. Peter, there's a lot of optimism coming out of Europe that there can be a trade deal secured here, both from Germany and now the European Union Commission. How realistic is it that Europe gets this job done, given other countries on the agenda for the American president?
Yeah, I think, we're getting very close to some trade deals, and I think that the harsh talk that we're hearing from President Trump is probably not going to be the final conclusion of these trade deals. In other words, I think there'll be less tariffs placed on a lot of countries, especially the bigger companies. In fact, it looks like that there's a good possibility that we'll be hearing from India a trade deal sometime this evening, and that I think would be the first solid deal that will be followed by some of the other major trading partners.
Peter, we obviously can't detect or predict the future, especially when it comes to President Trump. However, in the scenario that these sweeping tariffs do come in, what would they mean for exporters in key sectors like autos and agriculture? And how would the EU be prepared to retaliate or cushion the impact of these Liberation Day tariffs?
Well, I think the impact is going to be inflationary. The problem is that you really don't know what type of inflation you're going to get. And of course, it all depends on what type of agreement that you have. If you have steep tariffs, then the chances of inflation worsening at levels that are undesirable certainly could be a factor. Again, if you have tariffs that are not as steep as perhaps some of the rhetoric that we're hearing, the inflationary effect would not be as high as otherwise, and I think that that's the key here. So, bottom line is this: President Trump and his administration knows that they can only push so far. And so do the other nations. So agreements are likely to come about, and I think within the parameters of inflation heating up, but not to the point where it could be detrimental for the global economy or for the individual economy itself.
Peter, there are 27 European countries in the European Union, all with different import and export trade deficits and capabilities in terms of the United States. How might the EU's focus on unity and non-negotiable regulatory framework limit its flexibility in these talks, especially when it comes to doing business with the Trump administration?
Well, I think, for the most part, you'll have accordance. Of course, you may have one or two members of the EU that might not agree, but at the end, I think it'll be unanimous. In this particular case, I don't think anyone can stand alone. Now, will each individual country present its own case for their own agreement? Of course. But at the end, I think it'll be a unified agreement. And I think that would show strength and not necessarily weakness on the part of the EU or any other bloc.
Peter Cordillo, thank you very much for joining us on the program.